5 months ago, I made a video about Lunacid's strange mechanic of Lunacy. Lunacy is a pretty important yet underexplained mechanic that I really wanted to clarify to newer players, alongside clearing up misconceptions older players may have. However, within that video, I mentioned yet another mechanic, Moon Malt, and I vastly understated how big of a mechanic Moon Malt truly is. Because, in reality, Moon Malt has far bigger changes than Lunacy could ever dream of, compared to Lunacy, which only has applications for how much XP you earn and a single enemy. Moon Malt has differences for over half the areas in the game, alongside affecting a lot of small miscellaneous things. And while I wait and see where this trim thing is taking me, I'd like to look deeper into it with you. So you might be wondering what Moon Malt actually is. Moon Malt is simply a value from 0 to 10, with 0 being a new moon and 10 being a full moon. The closer we are in real life to a full moon, the higher the Moon Malt. Moon Malt has very little application at lower values, and the majority of its effects only happen when the number is close to 10, meaning it's a full moon. I have a whole list of things it affects prepared, so let's go area by area and talk about all the many Moon Malt changes. Appropriately, we're starting out with the game's starting area, the Hollow Basin, where we see the first effect of Moon Malt that happens in a lot of other areas, namely new enemies spawning in places they didn't before. The first example we have of this is the Anku, which is also the most prominent example. This is a special enemy that only appears on full moons. They wield a scythe reminiscent of the one held by Death, and they're capable of cursing the player alongside dealing very high damage. They are also one of the most annoying fucking enemies in the entire game, and I hate fighting them because blindness and curse are two of the most irritating status effects to go up against. This specific Anku spawns next to the Blood Strike spell and it guards it for some reason. Aside from this Anku, the Hollow Basin remains unaffected by full moons. Next up is the game's hub world, Wings Rest. Wings Rest gets a fairly subtle change that most might not even realize. The NPC Clive gets a translucent crown on their head. Considering the fact that Clive is confirmed to be the skeleton of the Lyrian mage Calamus, the person responsible for the great well-being and state it is within the game, and the fact that Calamus also has this same crown. This Easter egg is a really cool way to both foreshadow and confirm that they are indeed the same person. The Fae Mire is an area I usually go to after Hollow Basin, so it's next on the list, and it's a very special case. This is the only area in the game that uses the otherwise unused moon_light script, meaning that the area's lighting completely changes from green to purple upon a full moon. I already think the Fae Mire is a beautiful area, and this purple full moon-induced hue only makes it prettier in my eyes. Leaving the Fae Mire, the Sanguine Sea doesn't have any inherent changes. However, the abyssal demon that lurks within it does. You see, the abyssal demon's health actually scales lower the higher Moon Malt is. This means that they have far more HP on new moons and far less HP on full moons. This means that the abyssal demons in the Sanguine Sea and the Mausoleum are both at their weakest state during full moons. I must specify, however, this does not apply to the abyssal demon at the 50th floor of the Tower of Abyss. That abyssal demon is completely unaffected by Moon Malt and will always have the same HP. Yos Forest is next, and it gets a fairly minor yet cool change. All of the giant Lunaga moths are replaced with new enemies called Ga Mangetsu. This change applies to the forest canopy as well. The Mangetsu part of their name is literally just Japanese for full moon, so the name is pretty on the nose. The Ga Mangetsu have a different wing pattern compared to their Lunaga counterparts, camouflaging less well into the forest. The wiki says they have an altered wing shape, but I'm not really catching it myself. They also have an extra attack, being able to shoot a ball of light that deals a whopping 120 light elemental damage. Stats wise, the two are almost identical. The only stat difference is that the Lunaga has 140 health while the Ga Mangetsu has 284. The Ga Mangetsu also has no bestial communication dialogue, unlike the Lunaga, which does. The Castle of Fanu would normally be a pretty open and shut case. One Anku spawns in the Earth Elixir room on the top floor and another spawns in the painting hall on the upper floor. Pretty simple open and shut case, right? Well, that would be the case if it wasn't for this mysterious great bat that's supposed to spawn in the cattle cells by the second blood door on full moons. The reason why it doesn't spawn is pretty complicated to explain unless you understand how to program within Unity C#, but the gist of it is that the bat checks for something called spawn if moon. But the problem is spawn if moon checks for the current Moon Malt before the Moon Malt is even set. The base value for Moon Malt is likely either 0 or 5, which isn't a full moon. This means that the Great Bat will never spawn because regardless of if it is or isn't a full moon, it'll always use the base value of Moon Malt within the code instead of the actual current Moon Malt. I have no idea why this was implemented in this way and it was never fixed, and I demand that this bug is fixed so this Great Bat can finally run around the cattle cells instead of being stuck in Grout that gets limbo of suffering. The Throne Room has some of the most overt full moon changes of any area so far, all of which relate to the area's boss, Krelal. Firstly, Garrett the Hound will have unique dialogue if you fight Krillal on a full moon, commenting on how much stronger he is. Krillal works in the opposite way the Abyssal Demons do. His HP is at its lowest during new moons and at its highest during full moons. Krillal will also have higher health regeneration during full moons, making his boss take even longer and also making it so that he can fully heal all the damage back if left alone for long enough. Not only that, but Krillal's mask will also look completely different on full moons. However, once you break his mask and reach his second phase, he will not only stop regenerating health, but will take increased damage, at least from what I can gather. I stood around for a while waiting for him to heal and he just didn't, and my Ice Tear spell dealt way more damage than it did during the first phase. Terminus Prison has some fairly standard changes. 5 whole Anku spawn within this area, 4 in the prison pit and 1 in the lower levels of the Green Asylum. On top of this, 2 more Ceritulus Lunams spawn in the prison pit, and on top of that, Ceritulus Lunams' health scales with Moon Malt. These enemies are already basically mini bosses on their own, but having to fight 3 even stronger versions alongside 4 Anku sounds like a hell of a rough time. Heading down into the Labyrinth of Ash, we can find one of my personal favorite changes, that being that 2 of the giant skeletons will actually come to life and attack you, which is probably horrifying to experience blind because giant skeletons are nightmare fuel and I love them for that. One of the giant skeletons will spawn behind this door next to a health vial, and the second will spawn behind this door near one of the harps. The last and most important area to change on full moons is the Forlorn Arena. On full moons, 2 Anku spawn near the central temple, and there are 3 more Anku, but those are quite devious. You see, when you pick up either the Fractured Life and Fractured Death and go back the way you came, there will be an Anku ambush for both of them. The Earth Temple will have 2 Anku spawn right at the entrance of the temple, while the Water Temple will have 1 Anku spawn right here. I don't quite know how to describe this location, but you can see it for yourself. These 3 Ankus are spawned using 2 triggers, one for entering the area and one for nearing the chest. I had no idea about these Anku before beating the game, and they really caught me off guard once I tried looking for them. But the reason why I said that this is the most important area of all is because the Broken Sword will spawn next to the entrance to the Chamber of Fate on full moons. And this Broken Sword is required to get ending B of the game. It's honestly really cool to me how many things Moon Malt affects around the game's areas, but there's also 2 smaller miscellaneous things Moon Malt affects that I'd also like to list off. Firstly, Moon Malt will change all moon sprites in the game to be the full moon. This includes stuff like the title screen and moons in your menus. However, the moon at the start of the intro is not affected, and neither is the moon in the game over art. The Cursed Blade is also affected by the phase of the moon. On full moons, the weapon deals a whopping 475% of its base damage, which would make it a pretty worthwhile mid-game weapon if it wasn't for its rarity and the fact that there are much better options. The weapon also drains 1% of your XP per swing during full moons, but honestly it's not that much of a sacrifice, but it's still pretty annoying. I also want to say, I've heard some people say that this corpse in the Great Wall surface only appears on full moons, but I can confirm that it's always there regardless of the phase of the moon. I gotta say, I did not expect Moon Malt to actually affect so many things all across the game, though I shouldn't be that surprised considering this game's love for putting a ton of small details all over the place that have no real use, aside from just being fun little secrets to throw you off guard. And I had a lot of fun documenting these details, honestly. This game really is a gift that keeps on giving, and I keep learning cool and interesting stuff about it every single playthrough. And actually, there's one last detail I'd like to point out, which is that Moon Malt will stop properly working around the year 2031, because by then, Lunacid's eternal lunar calendar will be out of sync. It's likely that Kira would just update the game to make sure that the lunar calendar works as intended, but unless this system is automated, one day in the far future, this game's lunar calendar might be permanently broken, with no way to fix it aside from mods. But hey, the system works for now, so while it does, let's make the most of it together. It's been a real blast to discuss this with you, my friends. It really did help pass the time in here, because it's honestly been pretty boring. I really hope to be seeing you all next time. Later, taters! Well, here we are again. Once more, I want to thank my amazing patrons, namely Skipatronic, Psychoskull, Blue Phoenix 1, and VG Ceiling Fan. Genuinely thank all of you so much for all of your support. It really has helped me so much. And also, a little shout out to BladeCom for, watching until the end last video and getting a little secret right, and also Blue Phoenix 1, because they also did. For this video, if you'd like a shout out even if you aren't a patron, make sure to timestamp the little golfer man. That's the only hint I'll give. If you can figure out what that even means. But yeah, unless the DLC comes out in October or November, the next video I make will likely be the last Lunacid only video I make for quite a while, because I actually want to make videos about stuff that isn't just Lunacid. I'm passionate about a lot of games, and I want to talk about them as well, and it'd be a bit sad if I only talked about Lunacid all the time. But yeah, I'll be seeing you all next time for a deep dive on Lunacid's items, because they're a pretty underrepresented feature of the game. Later, taters!